This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 285 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today we are travelling thoughtfully to Hawaii. I'm very lucky to chat with the authors of a fabulous book, which I'll get to in a second. Before that, I just want to pay my respects to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, where I'm recording this podcast today on a beautiful sunny day. But likewise, in the context of this episode, I'd also like to pay my respects to the Indigenous people of Hawaii, because this episode wouldn't exist without them. So, regular listeners, you might remember I got very enthusiastic a couple of years back when I interviewed Annie Daly, who had written a book called Destination Wellness. The exciting thing is she has followed that up with an even more thoughtful book and focused on Hawaii with her co-author, Kainoa Daines. So I was very lucky to chat to both of them recently about some of the topics connected to their book, Island Wisdom. It's the kind of book, and I hope this is also the kind of podcast episode, which really fits my ideas about learning about a destination before you go, which I think is one of the most important parts of being a thoughtful traveller. Anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with Annie and Kainoa, and I hope you do too. I grew up here in Western Australia. It's very far from the rest of the world. And especially in the 70s and 80s, people didn't travel very much. However, one of my very first memories is one of my, some friends of my parents did travel, and they came back, and I reckon I was 5 or 6, and they had been to Hawaii, and they brought me a lei. It was a kind of a plasticky lei, but not too plasticky. And that hung in my bedroom for 10 plus years. And it was kind of the first kind of connection I had with a foreign place, and it seemed very far away. So I have still not been to Hawaii, but it kind of gave me this extra buzz to read your book, to think, this is kind of this place that's always been this really mystical, amazing place. And it's really funny. So Kainoa, I can see Mickey Mouse behind you as we speak, and the same people brought me back Mickey Mouse because they'd been to California and been to Disneyland on that same trip. So full circle.
It's a small world after all.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yes, indeed.
I just got that.
Big tick to that one. Well done, Kainoa. So this is how I approached your book. And of course, the subtitle of it is Hawaiian Traditions and Practices for a Meaningful Life. And so the meaningful, thoughtful idea, that just sort of resonates with me, very well as well. So this is like the ultimate thoughtful book on Hawaii. How did it come about?
Well, it came about as an outgrowth of my first book, which is called Destination Wellness. And in that book, I went to 6 different places around the world in search of greater well-being. And I know that we chatted about that on your podcast already.
It's a great book too.
And one of the chapters was about Hawaii, and an editor at my publishing house loved that chapter and basically wanted to turn it into a full book. So that is how it came to be. But she had a vision that she really wanted the book to be written by a native Hawaiian, and I totally agreed. And so she asked me if I could find a co-author, and that's when I immediately thought of Kainoa. And fun fact, we had actually only met one previous time. We had had one dinner when she asked me to find a co-author. It was a few years back, but I just remember loving his vibe, and we had such a great time, and we kept in touch on Instagram. And so I sent him a pretty random DM that was like, hey, hope you're doing well.
Want to write a book?
Do you want to write a book together? It really was that.
Kainoa, what was your immediate response?
Yeah, my initial gut reaction was no. And I want to say a lot of the people we interviewed, about half told me no at first as well. And then eventually said yes because they knew me, or they knew both of us. Some of them knew both of us from Annie's exploits in Hawaii as a travel writer. Yeah, there's a deep hesitation and caution for us as native storytellers that are oftentimes our stories have been taken out of context, bastardized, colonialized, altered in ways that we don't even recognize them anymore, but that's what for me flipped the switch, was that, hey, here's an opportunity to change that narrative and tell everybody through this lovely medium that, this is who we are and this is how we'd like to be interacted with and treated when you learn about Hawaii or visit. Because we're not saying for you to come to Hawaii, but if you do, here's how, and using Hawaii as a model for how you should travel as a more thoughtful traveler.
100%. Yes, you've been reading my mind. So your book is divided into these 4 main areas. So love, land, stories, family, which is, I think, an amazing way to approach it. I've got so many ideas. I could talk to you for about 3 hours, I reckon. But I'm going to start back at love. Okay, so love is the first section. And what I kind of took away is that this aloha concept is a big overarching everything kind of thing. It's definitely not just hello. It's sort of like, it reminded me, although it's different, it reminded me of like the Danish concept of hygge and stuff like that. The things that are really like entrenched in everything in everyday life. So my question is this: if I come to Hawaii, how will I see aloha in action? Give me some examples.
I think aloha, as you said, it's more than a greeting. But you'll hear that. So that's one part. You'll hear it. It's a salutation of hello and goodbye in that sense. But it's a spirit, it's an emotion, it's a way of life. And aloha here is something that is just innate in us. It's through the spirit of hospitality. I think that if you see somebody struggling with something, you're just automatically going to help them, right? Let's say you're on the bus and or the airplane and someone's trying to put their bag up. They're a little too short. They can't quite reach the bin. It's just automatic. Oh, can I help you? Or not even, can I help you? Let me help you. Like, please, I want to help you. It's just that I think it's natural for us that when we're driving, every other car lets everyone in. So if you dare to drive on the other side of the road when you're in America, in Hawaii, we just automatically let every other car in when there's a merge. And everyone says thank you. And everyone says you're welcome. And it's just this like, hey, we're all in this together. So I'm gonna let you merge because we're going to the same place. So why would I make you wait? So it's just, I think that idea of being there for each other, recognizing each other as human beings and helping where we can, supporting where we can. Does that, Annie, from your
I wanted to ask Annie what you think, what from a more outside perspective.
Are we miss a few?
Right. So I was thinking about that as you asked. And one thing that came to mind on my end that I love is that when I visit Hawaii, I notice that a big part of aloha, as Kainoa said, is understanding that we're all connected and we're all in this together. And by extension, a big part of aloha is getting to know someone and getting to know their story. And so what I love is that when you visit, like, a lot of Hawaiians will stop and chat with you and ask, like, where are you from? Like, who is your family? What do you like to do? Really stopping to ask you and who you are, and stopping to ask you what you stand for and what you value. And I love that because it's not necessarily something that happens in other places. It's for me, it's something that I didn't realize that it didn't happen until I went to Hawaii and we were, reporting on this book, and I was meeting so many Hawaiians, and that was definitely a common theme, is like, that's a way to show your aloha for someone, is making the time to chat with them and get to know them.
Most of our interviews just started on Zoom because we did it in July 21. So it was in the middle of the pandemic. And one of my friends who's a farmer, so he's more quoted in the chapter. He reminded us when Annie was just out here a few weeks ago, when we started the interview, we were just he was like interview number 12 or 15. Like, he was pretty, we did 20 total. Right. And he was pretty deep into the interviews, and he threw us both off guard by saying, well, Annie, because he knows me. But he said, Annie, who are you? Because we just would get right into the questions, so that we could get the transcript and get the deadlines. But he made us step back a moment beautifully and say, well, Annie, before we really get into the book part, like, who are you and where are you from? And it was so good because that is something that we do here in ancient Hawaii. When you wouldn't go knock on a door. We didn't have doors, essentially. I mean, it was a thatched roof and with grass in the frame and all that. But you would stand a certain distance away from that hale, that house structure, and you would chant your genealogy. You would chant your intentions. And if you were to be received, they would chant their acceptance of you to come into their home.
Wow.
And it was just this, I am Kainoa of Mo'ili'ili, and I am on a journey to the west side of Oahu. And I'm, and you would just, you do all that in Hawaiian, but it's a proclamation, a declaration of who I am, who I come from. And all of a sudden, and I am of this family, and oh, I know that's my cousins. That's come inside. Or, oh, I went to high school with them. I don't mean anciently speaking, but you begin to make these connections with people.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you are a part of their family. And that's part of that love, is that opening up, of who you are. Sorry for the motorcycle. Opening up of who you are as a person, and what we talk about in the book too, or some of our friends talk about, is a sort of a darker side of aloha. There's one aspect of discipline, that you discipline your children because you love them. You want them to know right from wrong. And sometimes it requires a harsh word or a fierce look or the back of a wooden spoon. I'm not advocating for that, but I just mean that there are, but you're doing it with love because that's a way of education, and so aloha isn't just this surface of hello, goodbye, and love, which it is, that's the surface of it. But we take a deeper dive that I think has also resonated in the feedback, that people did not understand or know, that this word that they've heard so commonly. In fact, I think it's a global word that people hear and associate immediately with this chain of islands in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's a very common word around the world.
Yeah.
And everybody thinks it's hello, goodbye, and oh, I love you, or, but the chapter and throughout the book, we really dive in. And in fact, Annie, you want to talk about that one question that we asked everybody?
Yeah. So basically, in order to write that Aloha chapter, we interviewed 20 people total, and we always asked each person, what is their personal definition of aloha? And one observation about that question that Kainoa and I noticed is that when we asked, everybody that we asked would just kind of take this sigh, and we sort of came to call it the aloha deep sigh, because it was just like, whoa, that, that's a big
question.
Yeah. It's like, how do you even answer that question when it's like, it's your whole essence, it's your whole being. And it's so different for every single person. And as a traveler, when you go to Hawaii, you feel it, and it's so deep, and you feel such a deep connection because that aloha is so deep. It's so deeply embedded in the culture.
And other parts of the world do have nothing quite as specific as aloha, but it's a universal feeling of connection between people. And we just call it that. It's not to say that this is a Hawaiian only concept. We just call it aloha. And there's other cultures that speak other languages that define connection between people, hospitality, love, but they may use many words. We just use one. Okay,
so that's part one. Part two is, of course, land. Aina.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I had this bit bookmarked because it was just so thoughtful, travel-y, for want of a better phrase. But you've got this section about cultivating a sense of belonging, which is kind of, learn from, the concept of Aina and take it away into my life. And it also strikes me as being good for thoughtful travelers. So thinking of every place you've lived as part of your story, lots of my listeners, like me, have lived in many places around the world, and they have changed me in many, many ways. And so that is, a part of me that I thought, oh, that's kind of a permission to acknowledge. That was really nice. And then some of the things that we always say you should do if you're visiting a new place, learning more about some of the local history, like you have a suggestion of, discovering the history behind the names of the towns and the streets, down to that kind of local level, and the land, listening to local music, that kind of stuff. So that sort of sense of belonging thing seems to me like good advice for visiting Hawaii for life and for traveling in general, yeah?
The word Aina literally, it means land, but it literally translates to that which feeds us.
Right.
That which feeds you. That which feeds me. And so Aina, and then going even further back, that we as Native peoples did not own our land because we believed in Sky Father, Earth Mother, and they created the world around us through mythology and stories that we believed in. But we continue on that spirit that how could you own your mother? You take care of your mother, and your mother takes care of you. So land to us wasn't about, I own this plot here. I might have responsibility for this plot of land to take care of it so that I can feed everyone. Because in the Hawaiian land system called an ahupua'a, and I believe we talk about that in the book, it's this division of land from the mountain to the sea. And I might be the taro farmer and Annie might be the fisherman. But Annie's and I, so I'm growing taro for everyone. She's fishing for everyone. But it doesn't mean that we're trading or bartering like in a Western style of thought. I'm just here to feed everybody taro, and she's here to fish for everybody, make sure they have enough fish so that we all are taking care of each other, right? So that idea of sustainability and land management and land. So yeah, we didn't own it. We took care of it so we could all, we could take care of it. It takes care of us, kind of an idea. I mean, if anybody owned it, it'd be the chiefs in a sense, right? The higher up, they have it. It wasn't even they recognize that the gods are bigger than them, kind of a thing also. But yeah, land is everything to us. And we, before Captain Cook bumped into our islands in 1778, accidentally, he did not discover us. We were already here.
We say the same.
Thank you very much. There's about 1 million people on average living here in these islands. No homelessness. Everybody had a job. Everybody had food in their bellies. Fully sustainable with no ships and planes bringing us our needs and our goods. So we're trying to get back to that and getting back to the aina, getting back to the land so that, to heal it in some ways because we've done a lot of change for it. But to that quote of, knowing where you've been, there's a Western idea of never look back, always move forward, don't look to the past, but in our culture in Hawaii, ikawa ma mua, ikawa ma hope, look to the past to guide you forward. Look to the ancestors, what they've done. And as we talk about in the book, their DNA is in your blood. What they did then affects you today. Choices they made, decisions they've made, learn from them. Yeah, so don't ignore that. Yeah, move forward, but learn from the past to guide you forward. And I think that's an important message of Hawaii. And I hope what we conveyed, and that's why this is ancient wisdom, applicable for a modern world, I hope.
I mean, that's definitely something that I've taken away from reporting this book is that I was so inspired by learning about that idea and writing about it that I started talking to my family a lot more about where we come from and where we are. And I had this idea also to get back to what you were saying earlier about how we come from various spots and all of those spots make up our stories. I really related to that as well because my family's kind of all over the place. And so I've always had this sort of idea of like, who am I? Like, where do I come from? What is my story? What is my history? I'm scattered. And now I realize that just talking to all of my different family members in all of those different areas, that's who I am. And that's my story. And so it's just about being proactive, about speaking to the people who have shaped you and knowing that that's not in the past. That is your present. That is how you are who you are.
Yeah, pre-Western contact, how we could memorize 1,000 lines of genealogy. We didn't have paper and pen. We had our brains. And it was important to memorize that genealogy. So again, you knew who you come from. Yeah, it's your standing in society. It is, who you are as your identity. And so that's an important part of it. I've asked many a group, in my work at the Visitors Bureau, just in general, how many of you can go past your grandparents? Some people don't even know their grandparents, and I feel for them because I grew up with mine to some extent. But I can recite my great grandparents and greats and great greats, and I'm myself a family historian. But even if you don't know that part, what we're trying to say is at least know where they came from, at least connect to that place. You might not know their names entirely, but they came from Ireland. Find a connection to Ireland. Find a connection to where people come from, where they came from, because you're going to figure out traditions and values and things that might help you better understand yourself. Like, why is my hair this color? Nobody else around me looks like I do. Oh, it's because my family come from this place. And we even explore the idea of hanai in the book. And the idea of hanai is to adopt, and in the Hawaiian sense, it's not just to the automatic translation is adopt, the Western idea of adoption with the paperwork and whatnot, but it's actually a more underlying connection to aloha. My family automatically just hanai adopted Annie right in to our family, and we wouldn't have it any other way,
Yeah, I was just emailing with your dad like yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's so
yeah.
cool. Yeah, I wanted
We've
to
got a
ask you,
nice
Annie.
little
That was
chain
one of my.
going.
Yeah, what does it feel like, Annie? Because it doesn't really happen in other, like, in an Australian culture, it doesn't happen that way, and I guess mainland America doesn't happen that way either. So, how did it feel to be basically, adopted into a
Oh my
new
gosh,
family?
it felt incredible. And it wasn't, by the way, it wasn't just Kainoa's blood family that denied me. It is his
oh yeah,
entire Hawaiian community family
Right.
that denied me.
yeah.
So I was just immediately brought in with open arms to this large group of loving Hawaiians. And I've just learned so many lessons from this whole book process. And it really and truly has changed my life. Like
Mm.
I'm so grateful for it. And I don't have another example of how this has happened. Like this is a new
Mm.
thing for me
Mhm.
to just become part of a group, kind of like no questions asked, you know? It's beautiful.
And that's why I think starting with the 20 people we interviewed started with just a very, very, very tight circle of some of my very best friends. And I said, okay, so I've agreed to write this book. You guys want to be in it? And these aren't just, I didn't just pick any of my friends randomly. These are the ones that I knew had very good information, thoughts, things to
Mhm.
share. And then we kind of built outwardly. So, we kept it close to home. I know all 20 people, and now Annie knows all 20 people, and well, because we spent a lot of time with them.
Mhm.
Some of our Zooms were hour and a half, 2 hours, and then when in August of 2021,
21, yeah.
Annie flew with our photographer friend Liz Barney. Hi, Liz.
Hi, Liz.
Three of us toured Hawaii over a course of 2 weeks and met everybody in person to get photography, follow-up interview questions, and spend time together. So she spent time with them since, and she's come back on visits and trips, and it's very much that family component. And you can look at other cultures like Italians and Greeks and others, and they're very come sit over here eat. A phrase in Hawaiian that is it's an older phrase you don't hear as often, but it's an equivalent to a greeting. It's ano ai. Ano ai literally translates to come eat. And it was a way you would say hello to ano ai, meaning hello, but
Come and share.
get in here. I'm going to feed you. And I often tell people, what's the first thing your grandmother would tell you when you walked into her home? Baby, you ate. Come eat. That was pigeon, but come eat. So that was that idea of you're going to be fed. And that's the idea of hanai, is not just that you're now my hanai sister, but we're going to eat together. We're going to feed you and you're going to feed me. And it's a reciprocity like aloha is. And my family is your family. And we're in this now. Like we're in this together. During we had a little book launch tour a few weeks ago. It was about a month ago now. We've been gone for almost a month. I had a surprise. I surprised my girlfriend with an engagement. I surprised her, and I wanted it to be part of the book tour. I did a fake book event because I wanted Annie to be there.
Yeah.
Wow.
I could have done it
very special.
I purposely wedged it in during a million different book signings and book activities to have that, because it was all my very best friends and family, and my girlfriend, now fiance's best friends and family. And Annie's part of that now. She's and that extended family. She's part. I think they're all Facebook friends with you too now, probably.
Yeah.
But just like that extension of family is so much more than blood.
Oh, that's fabulous. Yeah. Oh, I love that.
It was so beautiful. Oh my gosh. That was
That's
one
amazing.
of the great honors of my life, honestly, to be in that moment. It was so special, especially because when we were writing this book and at the beginning stages of it, Kainoa hadn't met her yet. And so I was sort of at the beginning of like talking about dating and like what he wanted in a partner. And then when he met her, it was like it all just
Perfect.
came together, and it kind of happened simultaneously with the growing of our book. And it was like this big, long journey where all of the principles that we were writing about were coming into practice in real life in a parallel universe. It was
amazing.
That's, I think, getting back to the theme of being a thoughtful traveler. I think part of being a thoughtful traveler is learning some lessons when you're traveling that you can put into place in your life back home so that you can keep those thoughts going. And that's, I think, what's so beautiful about Hawaiian culture is that when you visit, you feel all these lessons. And when you learn them, it enriches your trip while you're there, but it also, perhaps even more so, enriches your life once you're back home because you put them into practice and they're so applicable no matter where you live. And they've changed my life. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, Amanda, the timing too of this book, Hawaii has been a tourism destination for well over 100 years. I work for the Hawaii Visitors and Convention Bureau. Next year, we are 120 years old.
Wow.
So we've been around for a while. The idea people have of Hawaii is this Hollywood kitsch, little cheesy coconut bras and cellophane grass skirts, neither of which are Hawaiian. Elvis Presley, Pearl Harbor, and pineapples, none of it Hawaiian. And that's the idea of what people have. And our messaging, my day job and this book are like amazingly going hand in hand, because the message that we're conveying on a marketing level is Hawaii is not your playground, it's someone's home.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the book we try to unpack in the book. Island Wisdom is from a Hawaiian lens, but when you travel anywhere, you should ask permission. When you travel anywhere, consider that social media usage. Should I be checking in and tagging this place? Is it appropriate? Should I be visiting there at all, first and foremost? Setting parameters are important for us as travelers, because for too long, people have just been traveling free, just going and just doing their thing.
Yeah.
And when you come into my house, I have a rule: please take your footwear off at the door. But once you've done that, let's eat. Let's drink. Let's
have a great time.
Sing. Let's do what. Let's have a great time, but you gotta take your shoes off outside. So but the idea is setting some parameters and some rules, and then saying, but now you're good. Now come and say, like when I went to the temples of Thailand, you have to have pants on. And they say, if you don't have them, we'll got a little gift shop right here, and I still have my pants with little elephants on them.
It's I wish that there was more of this kind of literature for many different cultures. Like it's kind of the ultimate before you go somewhere kind of lessons.
I feel like it's getting there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. My work in the visitor industry, more and more of my colleagues in the hotels and other places have been reading it. And I'm not pushing it outside of maybe a little bit outside of work, but I'm trying to keep the two separate. But it's they're getting their hands on it, and they're reading it, and shout out to the Mauna Lani Resort on the island of Hawaii. They wanted this big old book launch because they understood it. They got their hands on it. They saw what the potential is, and more of our visitor industry friends are getting their hands on it, and they're saying exactly that, Amanda. They're saying, this is kind of important to know before you come, isn't it? And it's a really digestible, palatable, especially if you're flying from Australia.
Oh, you could read it twice.
Right, exactly.
It's a long way from Australia. But yeah, it's the kind of book where you learn a lot before you go, but then when you are there, you will get so much more out of a trip by having a grounding in all of these kind of philosophies and ideas. So
that's exactly actually what happened to my husband, because he hadn't been to Hawaii. Like throughout this whole book reporting process, I had gone alone. And so he was reading little bits and pieces as we were sort of putting it together, but he saved the big cohesive read to read like a week before we went, just so that he would have that experience. And he said that, if he hadn't read it, so many little things would have happened that he wouldn't have picked up on.
It wouldn't have made sense for him, because there's a lot of nuances in culture and language that we tried to break down in layman's terms as best as possible. And then once we were kind of there, then take a deep dive and then come back up for air, do a little explaining, deep dive again. And I think we did that pretty well. So I never heard that feedback about your husband. So that's actually awesome.
So good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear
he really did. I mean, one of the big themes about being a thoughtful traveler, as we mentioned, is to ask permission and to make sure that where you're going is, a place that you can go, and you're not going on sacred land. And he was so conscious of that throughout the whole trip. Like, I remember this one particular beach that we were going to, he was like, this is an okay beach to go to, right? Like, can we find?
And he probably would never have thought of that otherwise,
right? Yeah. Because it's like a lot of travelers don't, and that's one of the big problems. Is that it's like, as Kainoa said, so many travelers just think like, this is your playground, come, it's a free for all, and it's like the complete opposite of that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad because, again, when we started this journey, I was like, no, I'm going to keep this separate from my work. It's not a travel book, I kept saying, but it is 110% a travel book.
Yeah. For me, it's the best kind of travel book. So I think it's...
Yeah, it's very easy to, we've got little recipes in there, how to make a lei, how to make turmeric water to cleanse your spirit in your body, and all these little things that are woven, little nuggets of history. Hula, what is hula? I'm a hula practitioner myself, and having my kumu my hula teacher or master of hula, he's in the book, and Annie knew that, in the beginning. I said, there's a couple of people I have to have in this book.
Oh yeah.
And if I can't lock them down, we're not doing it.
It was a non-negotiable.
These are my teachers. These are my foundation, and I know their foundation, and they are everything to me, and they're all in there, and it was tough on narrowing it down to the 20 because we weren't sure how many people we were going to interview. We weren't even sure about those 4 chapters. It's just they all kind of started realizing there were themes as we interviewed everybody, and family. Everybody talked about that, and then land and love and storytelling, and then we realized, we need a little bit more on that. We realized these 4 buckets appeared. And we need a little bit more on that. I know a guy who can talk more about farming. I know a guy who's a storyteller. We can, begin to build up upon that. But yeah, I needed these people. And so I, again, really appreciate some of these people. I don't think would have said yes to anyone else. Not to anyone else, but
to the
a lot of
right
them were
concept, perhaps.
Yeah, but then the more, because they knew me, they trusted me, they got to know Annie, trusted Annie. They opened themselves up, and so. But then it was our responsibility to make sure that we weren't oversharing, we weren't giving away secrets, giving away the farm, if you will. We want to again practice what we're preaching in the book, walking the talk, and I think we did a pretty decent job of that. I'm pretty proud of the work that we put forward.
Me too. Well, and then one thing that we said at the end of the book too, which I loved, is that it was our responsibility to put it together, but then it's the reader's responsibility to carry through and to apply those principles to their own lives, because we reminded them, like a lot of the people that we interviewed in this book, that, they were a little bit hesitant to share this knowledge in the first place. This was a leap of faith, and it was something that they did not, it was not a light consideration. Like the stakes were very high. And so the fact that people are just able to read this knowledge that has been handed down for generations upon generations, like this is ancestral knowledge, and readers are really, really lucky to have it. And so now it's on everybody who reads it to apply accordingly. And
the privilege and the responsibility kind of pieces. Yeah. Oh, it's fabulous because it seems like a short, almost easy read, and yet it's so deep and clearly so much has gone into it. I mean, it must have been quite the process to actually pull it all together the way you have to make it feel easy, because I'm sure it wasn't, and certainly from what you've said, it doesn't sound like it was easy, but well worth it. Indeed, such a worthwhile book. And if you are ever heading to Hawaii, which I really hope to do now I've read this book, I always wanted to, but now I'm really extra keen, then do read it first. I think it will make a huge difference to your trip. So thank you very much for listening to episode 285 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. Massive thank you to Annie, Daly and Kainoa Daines for their time and wisdom. I will, of course, leave a link in the show notes to their book, Island Wisdom. And there'll also be links to our two groups for thoughtful travellers, one being a Facebook group and the other being a LinkedIn group, which is growing steadily as well. So just search for Thoughtful Travellers in either platform if you want to chat with us about your travels there. And especially if you have experienced Hawaii or have something to add, then come along and have a chat there. The show notes will be at notaballerina.com/285. As always, thanks so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.